Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for our Getting Aerial Applications into Climate FieldView. We appreciate you taking the time to spend a little bit of it with us, and we're going to get a great program rolling for you here this morning. Today's session is all about helping you capture all of your aerial application data, and there are some key best management practices that our team is going to be covering today. Our agenda today includes some housekeeping to start off with. Then we'll do some introductions so that you know who our speakers are. And then we'll get right into the main content here today on aerial application, giving you some best management practices. And then you'll even see a live demo. And if we have time, we have a little bit of bonus material for you on a new feature that is being added to climate.com, and that is launching today. So stay tuned for that. But first, we'll answer all the questions that you ask and make sure that we get all of those things taken care of before we give you that sneak peek. We are recording today's webinar, and so webinars can be found on the Climate Corporation's YouTube channel. Just search for the Climate Corporation when you go to your YouTube app or webpage, and then you'll see the section, the second section there that is titled Webinars, and we place all of our webinars there for the past year, so that you can go back and look at those at your leisure. Throughout today's session, we want to make sure that you get your questions answered. We have some great folks on the phone this morning that know all about FieldView. And so if you have anything that is on your mind that you're pondering that you want answered today, type it in the Q&A or the chat, and I will get that posed to our presenters. And if we can't answer it, we'll make sure that we get you in touch with the folks that can. So let's get into a little bit more of our business here and introduce you to our speakers. As I said, I'm Mindy McDermott, and you've probably heard my voice on these webinars before if you've joined us in the past as the host. But today I have two great friends of mine here with me. I have Matt Zimmerman and Jake Prather. And Matt and Jake are no strangers to FieldView. They've been around the FieldView team for several years, and both bring a wealth of experience. Matt is a climate activation manager in Northern Illinois, just recently transitioned to that role, so congratulations to Matt. But Matt does not come in as a rookie because he has worked for 3 years with the climate support team, and so he's been on the phone helping on the technical side with any issues or questions that have come up on the farmer side of things. Jake is also no stranger to FieldView. He is a field product specialist for Illinois, and he works with both our field teams on the Bayer side and climate side, as well as the climate science team, to look at grower-facing field trials and betas before we launch a program in FieldView. And so he works closely with growers to kind of test out some things behind the scenes before we launch any of those products. So both of these gentlemen have a wealth of knowledge, and we hope that you enjoy their insights here this morning. So without any further delay, Jake, I will pass things over to you, and you can get us rolling on the main stage of content this morning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mindy. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jacob Prather, and I'm going to kick things off a little bit with giving a little overview of aerial application data and kind of why we're here this morning. So to talk a little bit about the history of climate FieldView and aerial application data, for several years, we've been able to ingest compatible shapefiles of aerial application data. So what that means is we have the ability to bring in a shapefile with a coverage map from your aerial applicator into Climate FieldView, so that way you can view that aerial application within the Climate FieldView platform. Over the last couple of years, we've had the ability to partner and expand on our compatibility with both AgSync and FlightPlan to allow those platforms' data, those shapefiles that provide product and rate within those files to flow into our applications tab within Climate FieldView. And really, we want to showcase today the benefits of being able to bring your application, your aerial application, into the Applications tab of Climate FieldView and what those benefits might look like. So it flows into that application portion of our platform, gives us the ability to utilize all of the analysis features within Climate FieldView for the benefit of you on the call, as well as creating application reports, which, just to name a few things and a few benefits of some of the changes we've made over the last couple of years and enhancements. So when we think about aerial applications and shapefiles, you know, what is in a shapefile from an aerial applicator? There's really four main things, and Matt will dive a little bit deeper into that as well. But those four things allow us to bring in aerial application as an imported shapefile into Climate FieldView. You know, a lot of our aerial applicators, a lot of the cooperators that we work with provide, you know, a nice image, a nice PDF summary report after an application has been done. But this is that next step. This is that first step in getting a digital copy of that aerial application for our customers to be able to utilize with platforms like Climate FieldView. So when we look at display, it'll export the above files. We need those four components. And, you know, a best practice is to ask your aerial applicator beforehand for that digital copy. Some companies keep those files, some companies don't. But I think one call out and one reason for this webinar is we're coming up to fungicide application windows. A lot of our customers are going to be having these conversations, and having these conversations prior to that application or as you're doing it can help enhance your experience as a customer. And with that, once we have access to that file, that aerial data can be imported into Climate FieldView, and we'll show you in a live demo a little bit later how we can utilize that information and utilize Climate FieldView features. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt to dive a little bit deeper into some more information on aerial application files.
Thank you, Jake. Good morning, everyone. So like Jake mentioned, I'll be covering the actual data inboxing process of those aerial application shapefiles and how to avoid that actual data from coming in as an imported shapefile and making sure that we're getting a true application layer. So here, what you see in front of you is a perfect example of when you get that aerial application shapefile from your aerial application co-op and you import it, it comes in as an imported shapefile. Now, what that means to me from my standpoint is that we're missing one of the three key components or attributes in that file that is causing it to come as an imported shapefile instead of an application. And I'll kind of touch on that on the next slide here coming up. But missing one of those components can cause this to happen. Now, basically, what an imported shapefile is for us, it's just a basic coverage layer. It doesn't contain all the information necessary for us to render that as a true application layer. So we're not going to be getting the in-depth analysis, the good information, simply because it'll just be a basic coverage layer. The good news is with help from AgSync, FlightPlan, and other resources such as that, it's now easier than ever for your actual aerial application pilot to have all that information stored within that shapefile that's exported from the display, so that you should be able to import that file without any hiccups and get the most usefulness out of that data. You can go to the next slide now, Jake. So here are a few key requirements that we require in those shapefiles for them to come in as an application layer. First and foremost, exported application data from a monitor must be in the shapefile format with latitude and longitude marked polygons. Jake touched on it a little bit ago. So the shapefile components are going to contain the SHP, SHX, DBF, and/or PRJ. So without those latitude and longitude marked polygons, our data inbox won't be able to render and tell where that actual aerial application was applied. The good news is the majority of aerial application displays already have this enabled, already have this functionality. So that shouldn't be much of an issue for those shapefiles to contain that information. Also moving on, AgSync and FlightPlan are now 100% data inbox compatible. So any sort of aerial application display that uses those functionalities or uses those systems, once you export those shapefiles from them, you should be able to import them and not have to worry about all those key requirements or attributes being missing or not being in those files. So AgSync and FlightPlan make that relatively simple. And I mentioned those key attributes or key requirements, and those are exactly product mix, application rate unit. So what you'd want to do is have those conversations with your aerial application co-op to make sure that they're filling this out within their display. So for example, prod mix must be labeled as either Delaro 325 SC fungicide, Delaro complete, or any form of fungicide that you'll be applying to your fields. The application rate must be populated and cannot be 0. And the application rate unit must also be populated. It cannot be 0. Now, within conjunction of that shapefile, these components or these attributes are actually going to be contained, I guess, from a technical standpoint, in the .dbf file. So that's where those will be able to be seen, and that's where they'll be stored within those shapefile, and that's where our data inbox will read that information. Next slide, Jake. So here's your standard example of an orders page from AgSync. So this is exactly what your application or aerial application pilot will receive. And these are the information or the components that they'll be inputting into their display to ensure that your fields get sprayed appropriately and properly, and that all the data will be contained within that shapefile. So here in this example, you'll see that we have two things circled here, the application rate and the product. So in this example, we're applying 2 gallons per acre of Delaro 325 fungicide. So as long as this is all filled out within that order request, then it's a confirmation that the actual pilot will also be inputting this into their display that's in the cockpit as well. Next slide, Jay. And here is a post-application product use report. Once again, just another confirmation that if this is all filled out appropriately, then it's safe to assume that shapefile that you'll be receiving from your co-op will also contain that information in that shapefile. Once again, here's the location of where they're at, and we have them circled. The product mix shows Delaro 325 SC fungicide. The application rate unit is gallons per acre, and the application rate is at 2 gallons per acre. So once again, if you see these populated in that product use report post-application, you can be confident in that shapefile that you received from your co-op to come into that application tab and not the imported shapefiles tab. Next slide, Jake. With all that being said, once you receive that shapefile, made those confirmations within your orders report, your product use report, once you go to import that shapefile, you should see it generate underneath that applications tab there. You'll see the field name, the client name, the farm name, acres applied, the year that it was applied, and so on and so forth. And all you would do is check mark that box on the far left side, and in the bottom right hand corner, hit the import button, which isn't displayed here in this image. And then that should cue the data inbox to import that file and start to generate that application layer for us so we can start running reports and analyzing that data to see exactly how that fungicide affected your fields. So now I'll go ahead and toss it right on back to Jake, so he'll give us that live demonstration on how to run those reports within our apps. Take it away, Jake.
Thanks, Matt. Great overview of getting the data in and some of the key components to ensure that you're seeing a good use experience. And I'll highlight a few of those things and add a few comments as I go through the live demo. So once your data is in Climate FieldView, once you get it from your aerial applicator, the first question that we get a lot of times is, how do I utilize it? And what I'm showing here is a cab app, which most of you should be very familiar with. I know Mindy has done numerous webinars prior to this on a lot of the features. If I go ahead and click on the map, I have here a field from last year. And I'm looking at the yield map. And you can obviously see some definite differences over here on the right-hand side. But if I click on yield, I can look at my planting layer. I can also look at in season, and this is where we're going to see the application information. So this is going to be very similar to a ground application. If you're spraying putting on chemical with a ground applied drive compatible or data inbox compatible layer, you're going to see that information here as well, along with your new application layer from your aerial applicator, where you can visualize that map. One thing to call out here is right here we have a correctly named product that the aerial applicator created, but a lot of aerial applicators will actually create a generic tank mix or label it as fungicide. A lot of times that's not a very a huge issue, but it's definitely something that you can have a conversation with prior to application to ensure or ask that question of how are they labeling the product as your aerial applicator. For some programs, as we continue to expand on utilizing application data layers from aerial applicators, some programs do require more detailed product naming. And I think this is a great call out to showcase what the differences there could be. So if I go ahead and click on application rate, I can see the aerial application. For this field in particular, they did a trial where they left a strip there. And in the previous image, you could definitely see that something might have been going on that right-hand side. And as we look at the application layer, it does tend to show that that might be where we did not spray fungicide. So if I look at this, I've got my application map. I talked earlier about being able to create an application summary with aerial applications. So if I go ahead and click on application summary, this brings up all the pertinent information for that application. So you can see the product name up here. You can see the timing for the application, also the totals for that entire field. Another thing that you can do, just like a ground application summary, you can put in registration numbers, operator, license. You can put weather information, pertinent weather information, as well as add any additional notes for that application. This allows you to make some edits, make some notes, highlight those things, but then it also allows you to create a map PDF. And I really like this tool for reporting, for record keeping, as well as if I want to email or print this said report off to a business partner, or maybe someone that I did a trial with, to highlight, here's what I did, here's what was done, here's what the totals were, and here's what it looked like. So really great tool, great way to utilize the features within Climate FieldView. This is in the CAB app. You can also generate reports within the Black and Gold app, the Climate FieldView regular app, from your phone or your iPad as well. Another thing that I utilize a lot of times with trials like this and growers when I'm having conversations at harvest is generating a field region report using an application data layer. So one really nice thing that I can do here is if I click this more arrow, just like I did to get the application summary, I can also create a field region report. Within the CAB app, you have the ability to select passes. I love this feature, especially for applications. And when I'm trying to do something for a trial, I can select passes on either side of this test strip where we did not spray fungicide, and get a really quick and easy summary for how that area on either side of that trial performed. Takes just a couple seconds to create that report, but it's really nice because it breaks it down by total acres that I selected, what your total yield was, breaks it down by soil. You can do the same thing here that I did for the application summary report. I can create a PDF. I can also save that report. So this gives you a nice image. It also gives you the totals for that region specifically. So that way you can record that, print it off, email it to another business partner. But I'm going to go ahead and let this generate again real quick and save this field region report. Because looking at the area that we did spray is only part of the puzzle. So if I save that. Now, one question you may have is, how do I look at the area that I did not spray? So I can go into the create a field region report and try to use this cursor to generate a polygon. But actually, one thing that I like to do is I actually like to go back to my planting layer and look at the planting passes, and you can see within here the planting passes between the field region that I just created of the sprayed area versus the unsprayed area. So now what I can do is I can go back to the More button. I can create another field region report, select passes, and now I can select the passes within the unsprayed area. Now, one thing I like to do from my background as an agronomist and working in trials is I always like to give myself a little bit of buffer between the sprayed and unsprayed area. It depends on the trial that you're doing, but I'm not going to select the pass on either side that's closest to the sprayed area, just to give myself a little bit of buffer in case there might have been some overspray, just to get the clearest picture of what was going on in that unsprayed area. Just takes a couple seconds to load. You can definitely see a yield advantage for sprayed versus unsprayed for this field. And this is a great way to highlight and dive deeper into your application summaries and your application passes to see if fungicide or other applications gave you a benefit on your farm and on your operation. So I'm going to go ahead and click save on that. Now you can see that I have those field regions saved. With that, I'm going to take a brief pause. Mindy, is there any questions that we have?
Thank you, Jake. Yes, we do have a couple questions. First off, this is a question that we may have to reach out to the AgSync team. I'm not sure, but the question is, can we export an application zone from AgSync? And the note that they put with that is this would not include each individual path.
That is a good question. I'm not completely familiar with that. We would have to reach out to better understand. Did they the detail about the application zone, or are they just looking for a specific portion of a field, or did they explain that a little bit more in detail, Mindy?
You know what? Let's check back in with this viewer and see if I can't get some more details on that. So if you can provide more details on that question, then we will try to dig into it a little bit more here. While we're waiting on that, and before we check back in, Jake, if there is a field in this example, such as what you've shown, that has that path, that check strip, right, that they left unsprayed, is there a good way to show like the application layer and the yield layer together in FieldView?
Great call out. So I showed, yes. So if you click on this little book, I call it book sheets, but this is our split view. It's right above the more. You can view multiple maps at the same time. So I showed that at the beginning, but actually, let me do this. Let me pull up my harvest map. And let me pull up my in-season and my Delaro to show those two right there. And I'm actually going to do something really quick. So you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to delete this region really fast. But here you can see where the cursor is, where that red that I highlighted at the beginning of the live demo, that's where the unsprayed area was. And so you can definitely see a difference between the unsprayed over here with the cursor, and the cursor will follow you and synchronize both sides of the map, whatever layers you're looking at. So you can look at your planting layer with your harvest layer. You can look at your application layer with planting or harvest or vice versa. You can also pull up historic field health imagery and split view that to really get an idea of what else may be going on in that field. This is a great way if you're scouting, if you're doing a post-harvest analysis like we're doing right now. Sometimes a spray application or a trial is not as clear as what we see in this example. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper, especially if you're not as familiar with the farm or operation or what may have happened, to fully understand the picture and fully analyze that field. Great question.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake. The other question that has been brought up is, I saw when you did the application that the application rate was like 2 gallons per acre, right? But here on the legend,
Yep.
It goes all the way up to 8 gallons. And so it seems like the legend here is a bit wide for my application. Is there a way that I can adjust that?
Yes. So if you go ahead and just click anywhere within the legend, you can actually edit your legend. So you can do an auto adjust. You can do, so you can click auto adjust, which will auto adjust what your max and min are. But I can actually go down and do a little less than that. I can actually make my minimum 2, or actually I want to make my minimum 1. And let's say I make my maximum 3 instead of 4. Actually, let's make it 2. I click done and done. It'll actually change the color that my map is looking like. So a lot of times we get that question. Great call out, Mindy. Sometimes I'll work with a grower or I'll work with a research partner, and they're looking at their map and everything looks red, everything looks horrible. And it is just a simple fix of editing the legend like I did just now, to make sure that we're looking at the right ranges for that map, to ensure that we're giving the best image and the best view of the data layer that we're looking at. Great call out.
Excellent. Yeah, green seems to be less of a call to action than a red or a yellow, right? So maybe that makes the map look a little bit better or less concerning. Just a little subconscious thing that we might be, addressing, right? And so that is all that we have for questions right now. If you want to go ahead and keep trucking on your content.
Awesome. Yeah, so when we look at the yield and the application data layers, those are the main analysis tools that we can access. I do have another example of how we utilize multiple data layers, but I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the black and gold app, or Climate FieldView app, and I'm going to turn it over to Mindy if you're okay with that, Mindy.
Yeah, actually, this is a great farmer example that I wanted to just share with folks. So you can see here on the screen, Jake's going to drive for me, and we are in the FieldView app now. We were in the FieldView CAD app earlier. But this is an example of a farmer that did a larger block trial on one field, and so they really wanted to understand if their fungicide applications were paying off. And so they planted multiple hybrids in larger blocks across this field in the north to south direction. If you look over at the left, you can see that this difference in hybrids is showing up on the field health image. And so this is really cool because you can actually see the difference in that grain matter, and you can see those blocks that they really do correlate to the differences in hybrids. But Jake, if you wouldn't mind advancing to like September 13th on the field health imagery on the bottom left here. And so we can see which, some differences as we go through here. And so you can see that those hybrid differences are starting to, that looks good right there, fade away. And we see something else going on in this field. And so now we don't see as much green matter differences that align with the hybrid, but instead we see this east to west pattern that's showing a difference in green matter on the north half of the field versus the south half of the field. And so then over on the right-hand side, then Jake, switch the hybrid map, if you'll go to the application map. And so this is pretty cool here, that this shows that there was actually the application is what lines up with that green matter difference in the field. And so this is a pretty cool trial or test that the farmer did on their field, that they could see how this fungicide application impacted 5 different hybrids on their farm. And so the other thing that I will call out is that, and you don't have to navigate to this necessarily, Jake, but the soil type on this field is very similar throughout the field. So we don't have a bunch of different soil types, but it's a fairly consistent soil texture and type across the layers of this field. So the farmer used this as a great test to really test and see how fungicide did on their farm. So now go ahead and instead of that soil map, if you'll navigate to the yield map for us, Jake. And so we'll be able to see some of the differences, and we'll see if that early season foliage that a couple of those hybrids had that was shown in the field health imagery, if that really, translated to yield at the end of the season. And I'm going to have you go ahead and edit the legend again on this one, Jake, because make the high end like 285 for this field. And then that will help us show some of those differences. I think the 140 is a low, I think will be fine. And so we'll be able to see some of those differences within this map layer as it relates to the fungicide application and also the different hybrids. And so you can see over on the far right, that hybrid, if you remember the field health image early on in the season, was really, really, showing a lot of biomass. And I think that was like, if you want to go back to it, Jake, I think it was like July 14th or something like that, but you don't have to. So we want to see if those early season or even those differences in biomass translated to yield, or also we want to see how each of these hybrids responded to the fungicide application. And so one of the best ways to do that is to use a tool that Jake already showed, and that's our field region report. And so we can draw a field region report in the northern part of the field that did not receive a fungicide application. And then we can also draw a field region report in the southern part of the field. So I don't know, Jake, if you want to do that on the yield map there, just tap that field region report button. Yeah, you've got it. I know that mouse can be kind of tricky when you're doing that here, and so, yep, you're doing perfect. And so across that northern part of the field, just draw us a polygon across that northern half, and we'll take a look at those hybrids and how they look in this part that did not receive fungicide. And so what you'll see here is the hybrids stack up, and you'll see some differences. And I really want to hone in on this pink hybrid, hybrid S, and hybrid G. So we've got 272 and 270, and it's pink and then yellow. And then we can also look at blue. We'll just throw blue in there for a good comparison. But let's take a look at those top three hybrids. So pink, yellow, blue, 272, 270, 263. So a little bit of spread there between the bottom one. But let's go ahead and you don't have to save this one, Jake. We can remember that for today's purposes. And then let's go down and do a southern region and take a look at that field region. And again, it was pink, yellow, blue as what we looked at earlier for our top three hybrids on the area that was below or above that, outside of that fungicide layer. Yeah, looks pretty good there. You might actually, Jake, you might cancel that because we don't want to get that, we don't want the homestead in our region. So I think what you were doing first was that, yeah, that freeform polygon, or yeah, that works great. So Jake's navigating here with a mouse with his iPad, so it's a little bit different, but we wanted to be able to highlight where the cursor was or where his finger was on the screen. So that's a little bit of this jerkiness that you're seeing on the screen. It's not Jake not knowing where to go. It's just the mouse and how it behaves a little bit. So that looks great, Jake. That's a good region. And so we'll watch this report come up, and you'll see that these hybrids flip a little bit. So remember, it was pink, yellow, blue, and 272 was what pink was. So we saw about a 5 bushel increase for the pink hybrid when we added the fungicide application. But the yellow hybrid was at 270, so a 13 bushel increase for that hybrid. And then blue was 263, so a 10 bushel increase there for that hybrid with the fungicide application. So you can really see how these hybrids responded to fungicide. I would even say that you could look at the pink hybrid and be like, you know, that hybrid probably has a pretty good agronomic basis already. I may or may not want to continue to apply fungicide if I plant that hybrid. But the yellow hybrid, I definitely saw a good increase in yield and good yield response when I had a fungicide application. And so you can really see on your farm how these fungicide applications pay off, and if it's a good decision, a good management practice for you to implement on your farm. So I hope that this showed you kind of an example of how you can really take your application data and get it into FieldView and help you make better decisions on your farm. So Jake, I'll turn it back to you and Matt here, and I'll take a look and see what questions we have that come in.
Yeah, thank you for going over that, Mindy. And I think it's a great call out. I think, you know, the main purpose of showing these live demos today and going over the steps to bring your application data in is really to highlight, you know, how do you get all of your data in one place? How do you get it to work with you, work for you, and bring everything into one spot, so that way you can create a story. You can start to discern patterns or differences within your farm, within the operation, to really hone in on, you know, what changes could be made, what products you should be considering on your farm. Great ways to highlight analyzing data once it's all in one spot. I'm going to pull back over. What other questions do we have, Mindy?
Yeah, I don't see any other questions coming in quite yet, Jake. So folks, if you have questions that you have on your mind, now's your chance to get those posed to Jake and Matt both. The other thing that I wanted to ask too, though, and this maybe Matt can answer this question best, is what happens, Matt, if I work with an applicator that does not use or collect as applied data? Is there any other way that I can get that map layer into FieldView?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Mindy. And like we know, not every aerial application service or aerial application display is going to be outfitted with AgSync or Flight Plan to make it simple. And like I mentioned before, that .dbf file in the shapefile structure is what's going to contain our product mix, our product rate, and our product unit. So the best way with that shapefile you have that's coming in as an imported shapefile and giving you just that basic coverage map, I urge you guys to work with our support team. They do have some good workarounds and the ability to kind of alter that .dbf file to input the correct components and attributes in there to make that file come in as an application file, an application layer, so you guys can get the most out of your aerial fungicide application. So if you do have that instance where it's occurring to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to our support team, and they can assist you to make sure that they get that in there appropriately into your account.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And speaking of the support team, we do have a resources slide up here. And if you go ahead to the next slide, Jake, I do want to highlight that our support team is fabulous. And one of the resources that our support team uses is our Knowledge Center, which is found at support.climate.com. And you can utilize that resource as well. It is a external facing website that anybody with an internet connection can access. I encourage you to check it out and utilize the search feature for anything that you might be looking for related to FieldView. If it is applications, type in applications, and all of our information related to applications will be returned in a search for you. So a lot of folks I've heard say that it is Google for FieldView, and so that is where we place all of our support documentation. So let's go ahead and give viewers a little bit of that sneak peek or kind of the first-hand look at the filtering options that we have added recently. These are launching this week on climate.com. And so in the past, whenever you've been looking at fields in your account, if you have a lot of fields, maybe you're doing some custom work for several farmers in the area, and you have lots of farms and fields in your account. And so previously you had to scroll or know specifically the field name that you're looking for and find that in the search. So we've added some enhancements to the web. And so you can filter now by year, crop, activity, farm name, and by, go ahead and go back to that first slide, Jake. You can filter by year, crop, one more. Yeah, so over on the left-hand side, you can filter by year, farm, crop, and activity, and you can see all those filters. So now, Jake, if you'll go ahead and let's take a look at the year filter. And so you can see for every year that I have in my FieldView account, you can see those years pop up. And then if I wanted to just select one of those years, then I could select that and I would filter just to that year. The other filter, the next filter that we have is filter by crop. And so any crop layer that I have in my account will show here. If I had, let's say if I had milo or sorghum, then I would see a sorghum or milo layer appear there too, or filter that I could filter by. The next filter is filter by activity, and I think this might be one of my favorites. So if I know that I'm looking for a field that has application data, then I can click that application tab or checkbox, and then I can be presented with only the fields that have application data. So after that, if I'm doing custom work, is the farm name. So if I'm sorting, if I have several folks that I serve as their farm for their land, and I work with several landowners, then I can select here just by the farm name, and so that helps also narrow down and look at my my searches for my fields. And then the last one, we did still keep an open text search, and so if there's something that you want to type in, then you can actually type in a part of that, and it will find a partial word, a letter, a number. That search will surface that information. So those are our new filters that we have in FieldView. But then we have a couple more enhancements that we also added. If we go to the next slide, and these two things are again just enhancing your ability to look through the fields on your farm, on your account. Sorry. And so the first one is the quick summary, and so you can see that there are several filters here applied, and so there's one field, one farm, and 97 acres that match this filter. If I were to back out of some of those filters, then it would tell me exactly how many fields I have that have application data, or how many fields that I have planting data. So if it's in planting season and I want to see how many of my fields have been planted, then I can go to see what fields have 2021 planting data, right? And make sure that I have all of that planting data in my field. And then if it's harvest season and I want to see which fields have that harvest layer done for 2021, then I can do that as well. And it's kind of a way that I can track progress that was done on my field. And then the other thing is in the upper right-hand corner, those three vertical dots. And so if you'll go to the next slide, Jake, I think it shows that on this next slide. And if you know that you're always going to work by farm, then you can select this setting by tapping on those three dots, and you can select the checkbox that says Show Fields Grouped as Farms, and so that you can always have that grouped in that fashion on your field in your farm, in your FieldView account. So those are the enhancements that are launching this week. You may receive our newsletters, and so this information will be included in the newsletters as well. But we thought we would take this opportunity to also provide you kind of the update on the filtering options and new features that we've added to climate.com. And again, make sure you send us any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll get those addressed.
Wonderful overview, Mindy. I think this is a great feature, nice sneak peek for something that, since I've been working with FieldView, that a lot of our growers have been asking for. You know, when we create a new field, you have to put in the farm, the client, and the field name. And I think this showcases and highlights the value of that hierarchy and utilizing that for custom fields, for different lease agreements, for different landlords. You can group things now. A great enhancement that has been a long time coming, and I think is a great tool within FieldView now.
Yes, our teams have been busy working on that, and that's another, point that we heard from our customers. We heard from folks like you guys on the phone that we'd like to have some filtering options on the web, and so we really took the feedback that we received from users and put that into action and implemented that as a feature enhancement. So the one question that did come up was, what was the support website again? So the Knowledge Center website, it was support.climate.com is where you can find those support resources. So support.climate.com. And I don't see any more questions coming in yet. So I would just say, Jake and Matt, if you want to give us any parting comments and maybe emphasize any points that you made. I know, Matt, you gave us some best practices, and Jake, you kind of talked about the value of that application data. So I'll turn it back to Jake, or actually, let's do Matt first, and then we'll do Jake.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Mindy. I would say the key takeaway from my portion here today would be to have an open conversation with your aerial applicator, the pilot, the co-op, whoever it may be, to ensure that you're getting those 3 required attributes taken care of and make sure they're documented in that display there, which once again are product mix, application rate, and application rate unit. If all 3 of those are accounted for within the display, the exporting and uploading process is significantly easier and should cause less pain for you guys. So I would say that's the key takeaway. Make sure you have that in place with your co-op. And if you do run into any issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to the support team, as they can obviously help you guys ensure that they get that into your account appropriately. Go ahead, Jake.
So, yeah, one question I do see, and I'll ask Matt this real quick, is, we do have the ability within FieldView to edit hybrids and fix crop data. What are the options now that we have the ability to bring application data in? And I'm looking at the support resources here, which prompted me to think of this, but what can we do with application data?
Absolutely. That's a good question, Jake. And that's one that we get quite a bit from, obviously, from our support team, or that I've heard through our support lines as well. Currently, we do have a tool built out for application data reprocess spatially. However, we don't have the ability to change that name that's on that application. So if you do have it labeled as tank mix, unfortunately, we don't have a way from a support standpoint to go in there and edit that. However, what we can do is reprocess that data spatially, similar to what we can do with our planting data, our harvest data. We can go in there and make sure that data is actually based off its geospatial coordinates in the correct field boundary. However, that's only a support-facing tool currently. And I know there's a big push internally for us to get that into a grower-facing aspect. So there should be more to come on that, hopefully soon. And hopefully that'll be up there in the reprocess space, or the fix-it tool on climate.com sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, if you do have any issues with, changing the name of your application layer, an aerial application layer, or reprocessing it spatially, once again, don't hesitate to reach out to our support team. They can definitely get that fixed up for you and help you out there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Matt. And I'll just summarize. I appreciate everyone's time this morning and sticking with us for the full hour. I think the main purpose and goal was to highlight the enhancements we've made with bringing in application data, going from the imported shapefiles and coverage maps to getting to that next step, which we have desperately needed over the last couple of years, to implement trials. I know my team has worked very closely with the Bayer side of the business, and really finding ways that we can actually utilize and showcase differences or enhancements and be able to analyze fungicide data as well as just application data in general from aerial sources. So great ways to look at these things, and a call to action to the customers on the phone, or maybe even retailers, is have those conversations with your aerial applicators now. See if this is a resource, and see if this is a platform that they can partner with or continue to work closely with. And some of those key things, just to make sure that you're having those conversations up front for the required pieces of information. In some cases, they may be collecting that information but not know that you're looking for that information. So great things to look at. Again, we appreciate your time this morning, and I'll turn it back over to Mindy to see if there's any last minute questions or any housekeeping items before we adjourn.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Matt. No questions remaining, so we just thank you all for joining us a little bit early this morning. for this webinar, and look again for the recordings of our webinars on the YouTube channel, the Climate Corporation YouTube channel. And this webinar should be up on the YouTube channel by mid next week. So that recording, if you want to revisit, if you like reruns and you want to dig in a little bit deeper, then you can certainly check us out, and also check out the other webinars that we have already placed there. So with that, have a great rest of your work week, and to stay hydrated. It's pretty warm throughout most of the U.S., and hopefully you're getting rain for your crops, and harvest season will be upon us soon. So check back for our pre-harvest webinars at, say, late to mid-August. Thanks again.